Hello, I'm Emma from Ferret and Fern, and this is a tutorial about shibori dyeing with turmeric. I have here a cotton bandana. This has been mordanted, which is a process that increases colour fastness and light fastness. With turmeric, this isn't necessary. If you would like to know more about that process, particularly if you're going to be washing the clothing regularly, I can recommend both of these books, and I'll add these as a link at the bottom of the tutorial. Shibori is different to tie-dyeing in that we use solid resists on either side of the fabric to create a more geometric pattern. This is an example of a madder dyed scarf that I made earlier today. You'll see that on the outside, this example here, these edges are very sharp and nicely defined, and the further away from that square that you get, the edges become a little bit more blurred, a little bit more fuzzy, but it gives a really nice effect overall. And the reason these sections are slightly more blurred is because of the folding. So when we folded this piece of fabric, we folded it in such a way that this section was on the outside and this section was on the outside, which is why they're more defined than these sections, which would have been on the inside. So it's just something to bear in mind as you fold your fabric. In order to create the shibori effect, we need two items of the same material. So for example, here I have two pieces of wood. You can see they've been used before. And we clamp those together over the fabric, and that pressure is what creates the resist. Now you can use wood, which hopefully you have at home. You could use something like mason jar lids. Again, those will be clamped together to make a circle. I also sometimes use plastic, just from a children's toy. As long as they're the same shape, it will work. Different types of methods with clamping. So these are just woodworking clamps. You can use small ones, large ones. Do bear in mind that they can take up a lot of space in the dye pot, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Bulldog clips, also good. Again, these can take up space, but think about effects you might get by actually having these down on the fabric. You can get a secondary resist if you wish. And lastly, this is what we're going to be using, elastic bands, easy peasy. So in order to fold the fabric, there are a number of ways you can do this diagonally. You can do it in a small tight concertina, like a fan, for example, like this. What I find best to do is to think about the resist that you're going to be using. For example, we're using these larger pieces of wood, so to fold it quite small really wouldn't create a very good effect. So for this, we're going to do a quarter concertina. So you start by folding the fabric in half. Try and make the edges match as much as you can. It doesn't need to be perfect though. Then you fold this side back. Smooth that down. If you want to iron between each step, you can. That might give you a nicer, more precise effect. Depends on how much this means to you. And then there we have a long concertina. So what we're going to be doing is clamping this piece of wood like that. So we will probably fold this into 3. So fold one half in that way, or 1/3, sorry, and then fold the other third the other way. Make sure these are nice, and I'm putting my hand in here to make sure we've got a nice crisp fold and nothing is getting caught. We will then pop our wood. Oh, I need to fold it one more time. Like this. And then we will pop our wood one side there, hold it nice and tightly, and pop the other side on, trying to make that line up as much as possible. Next, we're going to get some elastic bands from our trusty elastic band pot. Okay. Got a whole mixture of these elastic bands, so try and get 2 that match so that the pressure is the same. And then we're simply going to do that, tie that around there twice, And because this is overlapping with the fabric at the sides, we'll also get a resist effect between each of the blocks. So we'll just try and neaten that up a little bit. And apologies for the grubby fingernails as well, I have been gardening all day. There we are, that's the one I want. And tie that around twice, there we go, that feels much more secure. There we are. The other option with this would be to use clamps, for example the bulldog clips. If you didn't want these stripes at the side, you could just clip it like that, and you can see that there's a nice gap through there so that this fabric won't get dyed at all. But I think it's nice to show you the different sort of stripes and effects you can. So now we have our scarf ready for dyeing. I want to talk a little bit about the dye stuff we're going to be using. This is ground turmeric, which we bought from HEB. You can also buy it in larger quantities, so this was an 8-ounce bag, which I bought from a dye shop on Etsy. There are other dyeing websites that you can get these sorts of extracts from. Now something important to note with this is that this is dyeing with an extract, so it's much, much stronger than dyeing with a product straight out of the ground. For example, if we dug up some turmeric root and sliced it, we would need a lot more of it to achieve the same colour than if we use the extract. The colour we're hoping to achieve with the turmeric is a very, very bright yellow. So this is a silk scarf that I dyed with turmeric, which is a really very lovely, very vivid colour. You do tend to get different results on different fabrics. So this is cotton, so it's not quite as vivid, but still lovely. The reason these are different is because silk is a protein-based fibre and cotton is a cellulose-based fibre. And those things react quite differently when dyed, to the heat, to the elements and things that you're dyeing with. So it's important to think about the type of fabric that you will be dyeing. We are dyeing, as I mentioned earlier, a cotton bandana. You can use anything that's a natural fibre. Cotton t-shirt, cotton socks, wool jumper, silk scarves, silk shirts, anything you have handy at home. So now we move on to the dyeing stage. So you can see I'm set up here with a heat source, a saucepan full of water, a thermometer, my dye stuff, and the scarf that we folded earlier. Now before we get started here, it's very important to remember that we are dyeing fabric with the intention of turning it a different colour. So make sure you wear old clothes, dark clothes, clothes that you don't mind getting messed up and scruffy. So you'll see that while I'm getting set up, I've had the scarf that we folded earlier soaking in some water. This helps the dye bath soak into the fabric quicker and gives you a better, more even result. So just half an hour to an hour before you start dyeing is plenty. So with dyeing, any sort of dyeing, quantities are very important. So in this saucepan I have 8 cups of water. I'm going to be adding 6 grams or 1 tablespoon of turmeric to the dye. If I was to increase the volume of water, say to 16 cups, I would want to also increase the amount of dye because the water will effectively dilute the colour and make it lighter. You can also, if you want to try and get darker, brighter, more vivid colours, add more turmeric to less water. So the easiest way to add an extract, which is a dry powder, to a large saucepan of water is first to mix it with a smaller amount of hot water. Hot water from the tap is fine, you don't need the water to be boiling. So I'm going to start with half a teaspoon because that's what fits in the jar. Pop that in, give it a good stir. If you have a small whisk, you can use that, but I find that turmeric generally dissolves very well in water. And then we want 1 more of those. That goes into the water. Give it a good stir, make sure there aren't any lumps. And then you're going to take this concentrate and pour that into the water that you have heating on the pan, on the stove. There we go. Give it a bit of a stir. It smells wonderful. And you now have a dye bath ready to put your fabric in. So now we have our dye bath ready, we can take our scarf, shake off any excess water, and simply pop that into the saucepan. Should have brought a spoon out with me. Let me use these little ones. Give it a poke and a stir, make sure it goes in. Because we're using wood, you will find that it floats. You simply have to just keep moving it around every 5 or 10 minutes to keep that. You can see it's picking up some lovely yellow colour already. It's very exciting. Now, for temperature, you don't want this to boil. You do want it to come up to where your thermometer says sterilise. So that is about 180 degrees. It's actually rubbed off my thermometer with too much use, but that does say 180 degrees Fahrenheit or about 86 degrees centigrade. Once it's up to that temperature, you want to maintain it at that temperature. Don't let it boil for about 30 minutes. And at that point, you can look and see whether you're happy with the colour, and then we can remove the scarf from the dye. So this has been dyeing now for 30 minutes, and you'll see that it's got a very nice rich yellow colour. It's also very hot, so I'm using a pair of tongs to fish it out of the hot water, and I'm going to put it back up and drop it into the cool water that we had it soaking in earlier. I'm just going to let it sit in there for a little while and let it cool down. You can see that some of the dye bath is washing out, so that's part of what this process is about. Now that that's cool enough to handle, this is my absolute favourite bit. We get to take off our resists. You can see we've got some lovely stripes here at the sides. And then we can pull off the wood to reveal the shapes. So now we've taken off the resist, you can start to see the lovely shapes that we've created with the dye. Now we want to rinse it in the water until it isn't losing any colour anymore. So we will actually take this indoors and rinse it in the tap, and then we'll wash it gently with cold water and a pH neutral soap. So let me just pull this out of here and you can see the result. Bring it over here, give it a good shake. Easy today. And you can see we've got some really lovely shapes from that resist. Now we've removed our scarf from the dye bath, there is still some residual colour left in the bath. And to use that up, to make sure we're using as much of our resources as possible, I have a second scarf which I'm going to pop in now, and I'm just going to leave that in the cooling bath, probably overnight, and that will just soak up some of the leftover colour, and we'll end up with a nice solid yellow scarf we can either wear as is or print on or dye over with the different resist. Thanks very much for watching my tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's a fun project for you and the kids, or you and your husband, you and your mum and dad, whoever. I will dry these out, take some pictures, and I'll put them up with a tutorial so you can see the final results. If you want to know more about me or follow my Instagram, it's @ferretandfern, or the website is ferretandfern.com. Thanks again, hope to see you soon.